Welcome back, friends. This is Haunted Halloween, Episode 4. Old Dad Guy here. Hard to believe it's almost October when it still feels like summer out there, here in Ohio anyway. The days are still in the 80s, and I'm definitely over here wishing for that crisp fall air, crunchy leaves, and the smell of campfire smoke. But if the weather won't cooperate, at least the stories will. Tonight we're turning down the lights, turning up the chills, and diving into another round of eerie tales to remind us that spooky season doesn't wait on the forecast. Enjoy. The Harvest House. Ethan Hale hadn't planned on returning to Black Hollow, Ohio. The town had been shrinking for decades. Its factories shuttered, its storefronts empty, its houses sagging like tired old men. But the letter, handwritten in that shaky, too thin script, was enough to pull him back. Come home, Ethan. Your Uncle Caleb needs you. Before Halloween night. His uncle had been the last to tend the family farm at the edge of town, a weather-beaten sprawl locals call Harvest House. Caleb wasn't one for begging. The man had a spine like barbed wire. For him to send a plea meant something was wrong. Ethan figured it was money, maybe sickness, maybe the loneliness of an old widower rattling around in acres of silence. He drove into town on the last Saturday of October, the sky bruised with storm clouds and a thin mist hanging over the trees. Black Hollow looked even deader than he remembered. Shuttered diners, graffiti on the water tower, a pumpkin patch on Main Street still lit by weak strings of orange bulbs, though no children played there. When he reached Harvest House, the place seemed almost swollen. Vines clung thick to the walls, pumpkins the size of bathtubs sprawled across the yard. Corn stalks, dead and brittle, ringed the property like guards on duty, and the scarecrows, too many of them, stood planted in uneven rows, their shadows bent across the soil. Uncle Caleb waited on the porch, thinner than Ethan remembered, eyes pale and restless. He didn't smile. You came. That's good. That's real good. Inside, the house smelled of dirt, kerosene, and rot. Caleb kept the lights dim, and every window was boarded from the inside. Wind gets in, he muttered when Ethan asked. Over a supper of stew that tasted faintly sour, Caleb finally spoke. They come every year, boy. Always on Hallows Eve. They want the land. They want the harvest. And if I don't give it, they take blood instead. Ethan thought it was senility talking, or maybe the fever dreams of an old man too long alone. But Caleb's hands trembled as he slid a box across the table. Inside were bones, small bones, the curved rib cage of something that might have been a child, or something like a child. They come out of the corn at night, Caleb whispered, whispering, rustling, faces like carved pumpkins, hollow eyes lit from the inside. They don't forgive. They don't forget. Ethan felt the stew turn heavy in his gut. Uncle, you need help. A doctor. This. But then the house shivered. Not the wind. Not thunder. Something moving outside, pressing against the walls, brushing at the boarded windows. Caleb's eyes gleamed. Too late. They know you're here. That night, Ethan woke to the sound of footsteps. Not Caleb's shuffle. These were many feet, soft and dragging, circling the house. He crept to the window, pried a slat loose. In the yard, the scarecrows had moved. They weren't still anymore. They bent at the waist, turned their straw-stuffed heads, and shuffled closer. One by one, their burlap faces split open, glowing from within with candlelight. Pumpkin-headed figures clawed their way from the soil. Their eyes burned like coals, mouths carved into jagged grins. The corn shifted, though no wind blew, stalks bending to let the creatures through. He wanted to scream for Caleb, but his voice was locked in his chest. Then came the whispering. Not English, not anything he knew. A dry rustle that slid into his ears and nested there, crawling behind his eyes. He stumbled back, slammed into the wall. Caleb appeared in the hallway, shotgun in hand. "Told you, boy. Told you they'd come. Best pray we got enough blood to pay 'em." Ethan argued, shouted that they had to leave, but Caleb only shook his head. "Can't leave. This land's bound. Always has been. Every hail that runs just gets dragged back." The creatures began pounding at the walls. Their fists weren't wood or straw anymore. They hit with wet, meaty thuds. Boards splintered. Glass cracked. Ethan grabbed a fire axe from the mantel. If this was madness, he'd fight madness with steel. If it was real, well, better to die swinging. The first to break through was shaped like a child, its pumpkin face carved on one side, black pulp dripping like rot. It crawled through the window, its candlelight eyes locked on him. Ethan swung the axe. The thing burst in a spray of seeds and sparks, but its body writhed, trying to knit itself back together. "They don't die easy," Caleb growled, firing a blast from the shotgun into another. "But they bleed, and bleed buys us time." All through the night they fought. By dawn, the yard was littered with broken pumpkins, shredded burlap, and ash. But the fields still whispered. The corn still swayed. Caleb sank into a chair, blood seeping from a gash in his arm. "They'll be back tonight, stronger." October 31st. The storm broke in sheets of cold rain. The creatures came again, more of them this time. They didn't wait outside. They swarmed the house in droves, spilling through doors and windows like a flood. Ethan fought until his arms screamed. Caleb fell somewhere in the kitchen, dragged under by 3 of the glowing-eyed things. Ethan tried to reach him, but the tide pulled them apart. He stumbled out into the yard, into the fields, the axe slick in his grip. The scarecrows turned their heads to follow. One lifted its stitched hand and pointed. The corns split open, revealing a path. At the end of the path stood a figure taller than the rest. Its pumpkin was blackened, its grin too wide, its light red instead of orange. It raised a hand. The whispering stopped. Silence drowned the world. Then Ethan heard it, clear, inside his skull. "Blood or seed? Choose." He understood then. The Hale family had fed this land for generations, not just with crops, but with themselves. Caleb had been the caretaker, offering enough blood to keep the pack alive. Now it was Ethan's turn. He thought of leaving, of running into the storm, but the scarecrows shifted, closing ranks. There was no road out anymore, only corn, only the whispering, waiting things. Ethan gripped the axe, feeling the weight of every choice behind him, every lie Caleb never told. He could fight and die, or kneel and live on as caretaker. Take the knee. He dropped the axe. The black pumpkin figure stepped closer, pressed its glowing hand to Ethan's chest. Fire raced through his veins. The last thing he saw before the world went dark was the scarecrows bowing their heads as though a new king had risen. A week later, travelers passing through Black Hollow swore they saw new scarecrows in the fields. Taller, broader. One of them had eyes that seemed almost human, flickering faintly red in the night. And Harvest House stood silent, its windows boarded, its porch sagging. But if you walked too close, you might hear the whispering. And if you were foolish enough to stay until Halloween next year, you might see the corn split open. The Phantom Parade. Our town loved its Halloween parade. It wasn't much by city standards, just a few floats, a marching band from the high school, and half the kids in the county walking in costume while their parents waved from folding chairs along Main Street. But for us, it was everything. Every October 31st, as the sun dipped behind the hills, the fire department would block the traffic, and the street would fill with people carrying plastic pumpkins and glow sticks. The air smelled like caramel apples and hot chocolate. Shop windows glowed orange and purple, and for one night, our little town felt like the center of the world. I'd been going since I was a kid, but the year it changed, the year I saw what the parade really was, I had my daughter with me. Emily was 7. She wore a witch's costume with a pointy hat too big for her head, and she clutched my hand while balancing a glow stick sword in the other. "We'll see the band, right?" she asked for the 5th time. "They're going to play the monster song." "You bet," I told her, smiling. "We've got the best spot." We stood near the old post office, halfway down the route. Families crowded the sidewalks, kids buzzing on sugar, parents holding thermoses of coffee. The mayor gave his usual too-long speech, and then, right on cue, the parade began. Only, it didn't end. At first, it was normal. The high school band clattered out a tune half the kids didn't know by heart, a flat trumpet trailing behind the beat. Then came the floats, plywood witches waving stiffly, hay bales with kids in pumpkin hats. Everyone cheered. Everyone clapped. Emily jumped up and down, glow stick flashing. But then the floats kept coming, ones I didn't recognize, ones that didn't look built by anyone in town. A wagon rolled past, wheels creaking. On it stood children in tattered costumes from another era. Cloth masks, patched overalls, dresses yellowed with age. They didn't wave. Their eyes were pale, too pale in the streetlight. The crowd still clapped, but softer now, uneasy. Behind them came men in band uniforms I'd never seen before. Not the blue and gold of our high school, but deep crimson coats, tarnished buttons, hats drooping with mold. They played drums in a steady beat, but the sound didn't match the strike of their hands. It was off, delayed, like an echo. I squeezed Emily's hand. "It's just another group," I whispered, though my throat felt tight. "Daddy," she said, voice small. "They're not smiling." I looked around. People were still watching, still clapping, but something had changed. Their faces were blank, their eyes glassy, as if they were watching out of duty, not joy. The chatter had died. No laughter, no shouts for candy. Just that slow, polite applause, like the sound an audience makes when it's not sure if the performance is over. Maybe we should go, I told Emily, trying to keep my voice calm. But the parade had filled the street completely. More marchers came, and more after them. Figures in black veils carrying lanterns, a line of horses with eyes that glowed faintly blue, children skipping rope in silence. The floats stretched into the distance, longer than the town could hold. I turned, expecting to see the end of the crowd so we could slip away. But behind us, the street was lined with more spectators, faces I didn't recognize, clothes decades out of fashion. They stood shoulder to shoulder, silent, eyes fixed on the marchers. Emily pressed against my leg. "Daddy," she whispered, "that girl's looking at me." I followed her gaze. On the nearest float, a girl in a ragged clown costume stared directly at my daughter, her head tilted, slow, and deliberate. And then, in perfect unison, every figure on that float turned its head to face us. Panic surged in me. I scooped Emily into my arms, muttering apologies to the people around us, though they didn't react, didn't move, just kept clapping in that dull, steady rhythm. I pushed toward the curb, but the crowd didn't part. They stood unmoving, eyes locked on the parade. My shoulder slammed into a man in a bowler hat. His skin was cold, his body stiff as if it had been propped there. "Please," I whispered, "let me through." He didn't blink. He didn't breathe. The parade music swelled, a discordant rise of drums and horns that shook my chest. I turned back to the street. The float with the children had stopped. The girl in the clown costume raised her hand, beckoning. Emily buried her face in my neck. "Don't let them take me," she sobbed. That broke whatever spell held me. I shoved harder, forcing a path, ignoring the stares of the frozen crowd. My legs burned, my arms ached, but inch by inch, I pushed us through, and then we were free. I stumbled into an alley, gasping for air. Emily clung to me, trembling. When I turned back, Main Street stretched empty and dark. No floats, no band, no crowd. Only a few jack-o'-lanterns flickering weakly in front of shuttered shops. It was as if the parade had never happened. "Daddy," Emily whispered, "where did they go?" I couldn't answer. My throat felt too dry, my heart still hammering. I only held her tighter and carried her home. That night, she woke screaming 3 times. Each time she cried the same words: "They want me to march." We never went back to the parade after that. I told myself it had been a hallucination, a trick of exhaustion, a bad dream shared between father and daughter. But deep down, I knew better. Because every Halloween since, when the bands start to play and the float rolls out, I hear a second parade. Not on Main Street, not where anyone else can see it. A faint echo of drums and footsteps passing just beyond the edge of town. And sometimes, when the wind is right, I see them. Shadows moving in formation, lanterns glowing, children skipping rope in silence. A parade that has no end, marching forever through streets we don't remember. Last year, Emily asked again. She's older now, braver. "Can we watch just once more? I want to see if they're real." I told her no. I told her we'd stay home with the lights off, with candy and movies, with laughter safe inside our walls. But in the quiet hours after midnight, when she finally slept, I stood by the window and saw lanterns bobbing down our street. The parade had found us, and this time, the girl in the clown costume stopped outside our house. She lifted her hand and pointed to the window where I stood. Next year, I don't think I'll be able to keep Emily inside. Trick or treat terror. Halloween night has a rhythm of its own. You can feel it in the air long before the sun goes down. A hum of anticipation, a nervous laughter in the neighborhood. Kids darting out the door before their parents can shout the usual warnings. Stay on the sidewalks. Don't run. Say thank you. I'd never stopped loving it, even as an adult. I told myself I left the porch light on for the kids, for the tradition. But the truth was simpler. I liked the feeling of Halloween, the way it made the ordinary street I lived on for years feel enchanted for one night. I stood on the porch that evening, handing out candy, smiling at the costumes. Superheroes, witches, tiny princesses with plastic tiaras, a handful of kids dressed as zombies with ketchup smudged shirts. The air smelled of leaves and candle wax, and in the distance, someone had lit a fire pit, smoke drifting above the rooftops. That's when I noticed him. At first, he blended in, just another tall figure standing beneath a streetlight at the far end of the block. Maybe a dad waiting while his kids went door to door. But the longer I watched, the stranger it seemed. He didn't move, didn't lean against the lamppost, didn't check his phone. Just stood there, dark coat buttoned up to his neck, a mask covering his face, a cheap rubber thing, white and blank, with hollow eyes. A group of kids ran past him, giggling as their candy buckets clattered. He didn't follow, but when they stopped at the next house, I saw him step forward, slow, deliberate, as though he were pacing them. I frowned. Probably some teenager trying to spook the neighborhood. But something about him chilled me. The way he seemed less like a participant and more like a shadow that had slipped loose. I tried to shake it off, but every time I looked up, he was closer. By 8 o'clock, the crowd had thinned. The younger kids had gone home, parents ushering them inside with tired smiles. The older ones lingered, roaming in packs, their laughter sharper, fueled by too much sugar and a sense of freedom. I stayed on the porch, refilling the candy bowl. The figure had crossed halfway down the block now, always behind someone, always a house or two away, never knocking, never taking candy. When a group of kids dressed as skeletons stopped at my house, I leaned down and asked lightly, "Hey, you guys know the tall guy with the mask? Is he with you?" They shook their heads, grabbed fistfuls of candy, and ran off. I glanced up. The man had stopped again, right at the edge of my neighbor's yard. That's when I noticed something that made my skin crawl. Every time the kids moved to the next house, they seemed to forget him. They looked right through him, laughing and shouting, never acknowledging the tall figure trailing behind them. It was only me who seemed to see him. By 9, the street was nearly empty. The last of the groups had vanished, their voices echoing faintly down the side streets. I turned off the porch light, sighed, and gathered the leftover candy. That was when I heard the knock. 3 slow raps on the door. I froze. Nobody knocked after the lights went out. That was the rule. Porch dark meant candy's gone. Every kid knew that. Every parent taught it. The knock came again, louder this time. I set the bowl down and crept toward the door. My hands felt clammy, my throat dry. Through the peephole, I saw nothing but darkness. I flicked on the porch light, and there he was. The tall figure stood on my porch, closer than I'd ever wanted him to be. That blank white mask filled the peephole, the hollows of its eyes staring straight into mine. For a long moment, neither of us moved. My breath fogged the glass. His mask didn't shift, didn't tilt, didn't blink. I whispered, "Go away," though my voice shook too much to carry. As if in answer, he reached up, slow, deliberate, and knocked again. Not with his fist this time, with a single finger, tapping lightly, almost politely. I stumbled back. My mind raced. Call the cops? Open the door and scream at him? Stay silent and hope he loses interest? The house seemed too quiet, the ticking of the kitchen clock suddenly deafening. I realized I hadn't heard any footsteps when he came up to the porch. Not a creak of wood, not a rustle of leaves. Another knock. This time the sound came not from the door, but from the back of the house. I spun, heart pounding. Someone was knocking on the back door. I rushed to the kitchen, flicked on the light. Through the glass, the porch was empty. Then the knock came again, from the front this time. He was moving, faster than anyone should. I locked the back door, bolted the front, ran to the living room to check the windows. Shadows stretched across the lawn. The porch was empty. I thought maybe it was over. Maybe he'd gone. Until the sound of footsteps echoed across the roof. I stood in the center of my living room, every light blazing, phone clutched in my hand, but my fingers too stiff with fear to dial. The footsteps paced above me, slow, steady, like someone testing each shingle. Then they stopped. Silence. I waited. 5 minutes? 10? Long enough for my nerves to fray. Then came the final knock. Not from the front. Not the back. Not the roof. This time, it came from inside the house. 3 slow raps from the basement door. I never opened it. I sat frozen until dawn, clutching the phone, staring at that basement door as the first light crept through the blinds. When I finally moved, legs trembling, I found the locks untouched, the doors still bolted, the windows latched. And yet, faint in the dust by the basement door, I saw them. Footprints, long, narrow, pressed deep as though by someone who had been standing there, waiting for me to answer. The police found nothing. They humored me, wrote it off as a Halloween prank. But every year since, on Halloween night, I hear it again, that slow, steady knock. And every year, I wonder how much longer I can pretend not to answer. The Candle in Ashwood Lane. Maggie Linton used to tell herself she'd never come back. Never again. But life has a way of bending your absolutes until they snap. At 33, she found herself driving a rattling U-Haul down the wet streets of Black Rock, Maine, the wipers smearing autumn rain across her windshield. The divorce papers were folded in her purse. Half her furniture was gone, sold to cover bills she never imagined she'd have. And ahead of her, in the fog, waited the one place she'd sworn she'd left behind for good. Number 13, Ashwood Lane. her childhood house. She told herself it was just practical. Her mother's name had been on the deed, and after her death, the place had landed squarely in Maggie's lap. Selling was an option, sure, but it wasn't like buyers were lined up for sagging houses on dying streets. And the lawyer's look when he'd said, "Maybe you should move in for a while, fix it up, sell it later." It had sounded so simple. Now she was here. The neighborhood looked even worse than her memory. 3 houses boarded, weeds sprouting in cracked driveways, a trailer across the street covered by a sagging blue tarp. Streetlights blinked like tired eyes. And there it was, leaning against the damp October wind, the old for sale sign. Only it wasn't alone. At its base stood a tall red candle, wax hardened into streaks that looked like dried blood. The wick was blackened, as if someone had lit it the night before. Maggie left the engine running too long before she killed it. Her hands gripped the wheel hard. "It's just a candle," she muttered. But she remembered, faintly, how the kids at Black Rock Elementary used to whisper about Ashwood Lane. Dares and double dares. Kids sneaking around the cracked pavement at night to leave candles. She'd never understood it. Not really. Until now. Inside, the house smelled the same. Old dust and rot. Underneath, faintly, the ghost of her mother's perfume. She thought she'd scrubbed that scent from memory years ago. But here it was, clinging to the wallpaper like mildew. She unpacked slowly, mostly in silence. The TV was gone. Her ex had taken it, so the house hummed with emptiness. The sound of the rain filled every room. She found the first note that night. It was slipped under her front door, written in shaky block letters on lined paper. "Don't light it." That was all. Her stomach twisted, but she laughed anyway. Probably some neighborhood kid, though God knew there weren't many left. She crumpled it and tossed it in the trash. The next morning, Maddie went looking for signs of life. She found one. Mrs. Koenig, who had lived on the corner for as long as Maggie could remember. She was smaller now, bent like folded laundry, her hair a frizzled white halo. Miss Koenig squinted at her, leaning heavy on a cane. "Back again, are you? Shouldn't have come." Maggie forced a smile. "I didn't have much choice." The old woman's eyes dropped to Maggie's hands, as if she expected to see something there. "That candle," she whispered. "It comes back when the lane wants feeding. Don't touch it. Don't even breathe on it." Maggie tried to brush it off, but the woman clutched her wrist with surprising strength and pressed a small wooden cross into her palm. Handmade, crooked, splintered. "Keep it close," Miss Koenig said. That night, Maggie locked the cross in the drawer by her bed. At 2:47 a.m., Maggie woke to light against her window. She pushed back the curtain. The candle at the for sale sign burned bright. Its flame bent toward her bedroom. Her stomach turned cold. She put on a sweater and went outside, flashlight in hand. The candle hissed when the beam touched it. She crouched, reached out to pinch the flame dead. But the wax under her fingers was cold. The fire bent like it wanted to touch her. She yanked back, heart hammering. When she woke the next morning, the candle was gone. Maggie spent the next day at the Black Rock Library, digging into newspapers on microfilm. She wasn't sure what she expected to find. A story about cults, maybe, or an arsonist. What she found were fragments. 1974. Local girl vanishes at Ashwood Lane. Last seen carrying a candle. 1989. Teenagers found dead in vacant house on Ashwood Lane. Fire suspected. 2003. Resident claims harassment. Unexplained candles left at home nightly. The reports always ended the same. No arrests, no explanations. The police shrugged it off as vandalism or kids playing pranks. But it wasn't just kids. The victims were always people who lived at number 13. Always. Maggie stared at the screen until her eyes blurred. On October 28th, Maggie came home from the store to find the candle waiting inside. It stood on her hallway table, wax dripping onto the wood. She froze. Her bag slipped from her arms. The wick caught fire on its own. Shadows bled across the wallpaper, bending and stretching. The house felt smaller, closing in. Her breath stuttered. She grabbed the little cross from her drawer and held it out like a weapon. "Leave me alone." The flame sputtered, guttered. Then every window in the house rattled at once, like a storm was battering the walls. She dropped the cross in shock. The candle burned steady again. That night, she heard them. Voices in the wallpaper. Not whispers, not anymore. Full words rising and falling like a chant. "Join us! Join us! Join us!" She tore at the wallpaper with her nails until they bled. Behind the paper, she swore she saw faces pressed into the plaster. Dozens of them, eyes wide, mouths open, moving. She staggered back, clutching her raw hands. The candle on the table flickered. The faces in the walls smiled. On October 30th, she drove out of town. She didn't pack, didn't plan. She just drove. The candle had followed her from room to room the night before, appearing on her bathroom sink, on the step outside her bedroom. She thought she might go insane if she stayed. But the farther she drove, the more her headlights seemed to dim. The road bent back in on itself. She passed the same gas station twice, then 3 times. By midnight, she was back on Ashwood Lane. The house loomed ahead, lit faintly by a single glow at the door. The candle. The storm broke over Black Rock on Halloween. Rain lashed sideways. Trees bowed and cracked. At midnight, the candle appeared in her kitchen. The flame bent toward her heart. The walls moaned. The voices screamed. The faces pressed harder, their mouths gaping wider. Maggie grabbed the axe she'd left by her table. Her reflection in the kitchen window showed her pale, hollowed eyes. She thought of her mother, how she'd wasted away in this same house, whispering about shadows no one else could see. Maggie lifted the axe. The candle's flame jumped higher, as if daring her. She brought the axe down. The candle split in 2. The flames went out. Silence fell. The wallpaper was blank again. The house was just a house. Maggie sat on the floor for hours, axe across her knees, shaking. When dawn came, she stumbled outside. At the base of the for sale sign, another candle waited, unlit. This one was new, wick fresh and white, waiting. 2 weeks later, the ad appeared in the Black Rock Gazette. Charming fixer-upper on Ashwood Lane, motivated seller. The young couple who came to tour the place laughed at the single red candle sitting on the porch. How quaint, they said. Perfect Halloween decoration. They took it with them. Camp Ashen Pines. People always told me I had lousy timing. Divorce, job loss, busted car. All those dominoes seemed to fall at once this year. So when Danny called and asked me to come camping, my first thought was, why not add bad weather and bad sleep to the pile? Danny had been my friend since high school. All energy, no breaks. He pitched the idea like it was a cure for cancer. We'll clear out our heads, drink too much, and maybe scare the hell out of ourselves. Halloween in the woods. Perfect, man. I should have said no, but instead, I said yes. We loaded gear into Danny's old Ford and drove 2 hours north into the mountains. Riding with us were Tasha, his girlfriend, sharp-tongued but good-hearted, and Greg, my old college roommate. The woods grew thicker as we climbed. The trees here weren't healthy maples or pines. They were tall and spindly, gray bark flaking, branches like claws. The air felt colder too, like fall had skipped right to winter. We parked at a rusted gate where the trail began. Beyond lay Ashen Pines, an abandoned campground near a quarry that had shut down in the 80s. The place had a reputation in town. People went missing out there. Hikers, hunters, teenagers on dares. Danny laughed it off. Urban legend. Ghost stories for gas stations. What better place to drink beer? I stared past the gate. The trail disappeared into a tunnel of black trees. The silence of it sank into my bones. The hike in took longer than expected. Dead leaves soaked with rain sucked at our boots. Birds were scarce. The few we heard screeched and then went silent, like something had startled them. When the trees broke, we came to the quarry. A massive gouge in the earth, half filled with stagnant green water. The surface didn't reflect sky or trees, just darkness. Tasha stopped at the edge, clutching her arms. Why's it look like that? Danny grinned. They say it's bottomless. If you fall in, you don't come back up. Nobody laughed. We reached the old campsite near dusk. A ring of stones, blackened by old fires, waited in the clearing. The woods pressed close on every side, branches creaking in the wind. We pitched tents, gathered wood, and by nightfall we had a small blaze pushing back the dark. Beer cracked, stories flowed. Danny told one about a faceless hitchhiker. Tasha told one about a drowned woman in the quarry. Greg made up something about hunters hearing voices. When it came to me, I shook my head. No story tonight. Truth was, the woods already felt alive enough, like someone listened every time we opened our mouths. That was when we heard the first sound. A crunch. Leaves underfoot. Not ours. From just beyond the firelight. We froze. The fire popped. Danny forced a grin. Probably a deer. But Greg swung the lantern toward the sound. For a second, I swore I saw something pale between the trees. A face. Watching. And then it was gone. Around midnight, Greg went to piss. He wandered past the fire, lantern swinging. Don't let the boogeyman get me, he called back. We chuckled weakly. Minutes passed. Too many. Greg? Danny called. No answer. We grabbed another lantern and went after him. The forest closed in tight. The light made a tunnel in the black, everything outside it shifting. We found the lantern first, lying on its side, still burning. Greg was gone. Ground nearby was disturbed. Leaves scuffed aside as if something heavy had been dragged. And there were prints, bare feet, dozens, circling the spot like dancers. We stumbled back to camp. Greg wasn't there. His beer sat half finished, his pack untouched. That was when the voices began. Soft at first, a hiss, a murmur. Then they got clearer, words we couldn't understand. Shapes moved between the trees, tall, thin, all wrong. Faces pale as moonlight, eyes too dark. Tasha gripped my arm, whispering, "Is that Greg?" I looked. My stomach turned. Greg stood among them, his face empty, eyes blank, holding a candle that burned red. He didn't blink, didn't look at us, just melded into the dark with them. Danny grabbed Tasha, shoving her toward the trail. "We're leaving now." But when we tried, the path was gone. Trees grew where the trail had been. The forest shifted. Candles appeared instead, dozens of them, red, their flames bending toward us, on stumps, in hollows, floating even on the quarry water. The voices grew louder. We ran anyway. Branches tore at our clothes. The air grew heavy, smoky, like burning leaves. When we reached the quarry clearing, figures lined the edge, dozens, holding candles. In the center stood Greg. The figures raised their candles as one. The flames blazed higher, bending toward us. The ground seemed to tilt toward the water. Greg's smile was too wide, stretched like skin that didn't fit. "Come on," he said. "It's time." Danny roared, grabbed a burning branch and charged. The figures closed over him like a wave. His scream cut off in an instant. Tasha fell to her knees, sobbing. I hauled her back, but the ground tilted harder, the quarry pulling us. The water rippled, dark hands reaching from below. The last thing I remember was the red light of candles swallowing the night. You thought you were alone, didn't you? But they've been watching the whole time. Like, subscribe, and maybe they'll let you sleep tonight.